Are you struggling with Reclamation algorithms early game? Feel like you could be wasting your hard-earned resources on the wrong upgrades before a raid wipes you off the map? There's good news for you. Now that all of the content expansions have been released, there are now very powerful options for you to explore and exploit to make your Sargonian Empire flourish through the early game. In this guide, I'll be going over some of the most important aspects of the early game that I've gone over in previous videos, as well as some of the new things I couldn't cover back then that I think will really help you expand your domain. As a quick side note, I try to be comprehensive and thorough when covering this, so I do provide timestamps in the description for each section. But if you just want to look at the script that I wrote, there's a companion post over in my Patreon that you can search through for free, no donation needed, but greatly appreciated. Firstly, let's talk about Peaceful Mode and Standard Mode. If you didn't know these existed, it's easy to miss. The game doesn't exactly point it out. You can toggle these modes with this circular button on the title screen whenever you'd like, even if you're not at day 1. Besides Peaceful Mode removing most raids allowing you to hunt and collect resources undisturbed, you also gain 2 very important perks for overworld maps under these difficulties. The HP of resource tiles is reduced by a significant amount, and the amount of energy drink juice you get from consuming food items is drastically increased. This makes harvesting wood for your first Krabby Pumpies and planter boxes much easier to accomplish, and the food that you get from those planter boxes and hunting goes so much farther too. Rack up a surplus of food by making as many planter boxes as you can per HQ level, and you can start fielding even bigger squads to chop down and haul back even more resources. I've mostly played in challenge mode since it was the original default. This made food the backbone of the action economy, so the sooner I secured my meals, the earlier I was able to start thinking about expansion without worrying about the food supply. But from the testing I've done and the feedback that I've heard from other players who started playing on Peaceful and Standard from the beginning, I can't overstate how much pressure this relieves for you in the early game, and this might honestly be the single biggest and easiest thing you can do to ease your first RA experience. With that note on difficulty modes out of the way, let's talk about the other huge addition to the early game economy. Maps inside Feral Strange Territories, or FSTs, are also a great early source of extra food and wood that become available to you very early in your journey, thanks to the expansion. And seriously, these things almost trivialize the early game economy compared to being limited to just the maps on the normal overworld. You can think of them like the bonus floors from integrated strategies you can get into via boss key passages or possibility nodes. You can even select a difficulty before you enter, which will affect which maps and loot you get, which can be handy for finding specific things at higher or lower difficulties. Once inside, you're able to spend a set of extra days plundering loot on fresh copies of maps without advancing the normal day count. Fulfilling the objectives given for the FST gives you even more rewards on top of everything you're hauling back to base. But if you're playing on Standard or Peaceful, note that the adjustments that I mentioned for the resource tiles and energy drink costs are nullified inside of them, so if you can, make your energy drinks for the amount of days that you'll be spending in there beforehand while you're still at home base, and just be mindful of the extra tanky resource tiles. I should mention, depending on your luck, you might find the maps and map layout that you get inside an FST not worth tackling at some point thanks to a crappy modifier or a really difficult map in the way that might be intended for later in the game. If that happens, you can simply leave and go home to generate a new one without consequences. Even if you don't achieve your objective, you'll still get a small amount of gold as a consolation prize. Speaking of gold, the resource snowball effect doesn't stop at just stuff that you harvest. Gold is also an easier resource to acquire these days too. The things that you can do for a nice chunk of change include farming encounters, beating up raids or bosses, crushing fortresses, and more. But the easiest, and likely first way you'll get gold in the early game, is to look for treasure chests on unexplored maps to bash open. There is a handy spreadsheet with the map layouts that people use to look for chest spawn locations, link in the description, but those spawns can sometimes be RNG dependent, so remember to scout diligently so that you don't miss out or get caught by an enemy you might not have identified while looting. You might also need to look out for cracked rocks to open up the areas that have chests. These rocks can only be targeted by operators adjacent to them in the 4 cardinal directions, unless you have a valid splash damage option, a list shown here. Don't ask me why this is so inconsistent, it's probably due to spaghetti code. Moving on, all of this money can be used in the early game towards a fantastic new addition, Deluxe Tools. These are the same as their non-deluxe counterparts, but do not benefit from tech tree upgrades. Instead, they only cost gold instead of materials to craft. Or I guess purchase? I guess crafting is a more accurate term since you get them from the workbench instead of Liaison Shop. Whatever. For example, you can use a deluxe Krabby Pumpy as an alternative to spending wood in the early game so that you can save it for the HQ level 2 upgrade cost. At that point, you'll unlock deluxe sawing harvester hubs in your workbench, letting you invest your gold into using these important bread and butter tools early on. Depending on what map you deploy them on and how many operators you deploy, these things can easily pay for themselves and net you a lot more wood than what you could buy at Liaison Shop with the same amount of gold. Combining harvesting hubs with DPS operators in general is usually the most optimal way to collect resources, rather than just sending out operators with decent block count and fast redeploy. That said, ideally, you do both. The best part? Unlike regular sawing harvester hubs, these things don't require stone, a resource that is a little hard to come by until you expand outwards towards the second region and acquire the mining permit. Now, I'm happy to report that deluxe tool versions exist for stone hubs and iron hubs too, so if you're low on their respective resources, these deluxe hubs will bail you out in a pinch. These deluxe tools also have independent cooldowns and deployment caps from their standard counterparts, so if you decide to bring both types, you have the option of slamming them down and clearing out maps even faster than before. Overall though, I'd say you should still try to invest in the harvesting hub tech tree upgrades early though, as the first few deluxe hubs that you use should give you more than enough resources to use the standard ones that are more efficient from the upgrades. Now there's another early game tool that wasn't here before that makes operators and harvesting hub drones even better, the Exoskeleton. It's a new consumable passive tool available for crafting right at the start of the game that triples all of your operators' carrying capacity and expands the collection area for operators to include all 8 tiles around an operator, plus the tiles that are 2 tiles away in the 4 cardinal directions. It's very cheap too. When equipped, only 1 charge is used per act point to buff all of your operators and hub drones for that act, and the crafting recipe is only 16 wood for a stack of 5 charges. Now, did you notice I said hub drones too? Surprisingly, drones also benefit from the increased collection radius. It was actually pretty interesting. I didn't expect it to work on drones until I noticed tiles being collected that weren't in my operator's buffed collection range. When I realized that these were still getting cleaned out by the drones passing by, I thought that was super cool and worth pointing out here. As for the carrying capacity multiplier, you can take extra advantage of that perk by using any skills or effects that increase block count, even if it's temporary. For example, Mr. Nothing gains a +1 block passively with his skill 1. If you pair that with the fact that merchant specialists have fast redeployment times, he becomes a worthy addition to an early game collection crew, even at E0 level 1. 2-star Yato is also a great pick for this reason. She's cheap, has 2 block, and her talent allows her to have reasonably fast redeployment. This isn't just useful on fast redeploying operators though. Gaviel the Invincible on skill 3 is another great example that lets her pull the double duty of grinding down resources and helping to haul it all back to base with her whopping 15 total carrying capacity with her skill active. Needless to say, if you're collecting any sort of tile-based resource on any map, you should never go without this fantastic perk, and some of the new maps introduced in the expansion, such as Vanilla Vale, were balanced with Exoskeleton in mind too. Now, even 1-block high ground operators can carry 3 units of resources back to base, even if they're deployed on the diagonal adjacent tile. Just be sure to double check whether or not monsoon season is affecting your block count though. 0 times 3 is still 0, and if you drop gravel or some other 1-block operator next to a resource tile in monsoon season, Exoskeleton won't save you from your disappointment. While we're on the topic of resource harvesting, I wanted to bring up Kestrel, the operator you can receive as a reward relatively early on in your RA journey. She's a special mention here because it leads to another important tip I have for learning RA. Now that she's been out for a while, a lot of other doctors dismiss Kestrel these days since her stats and kit are underwhelming for an offensively oriented Pioneer Vanguard. Besides, Agent Vanguards are easily better choices in terms of who to build for the best return on investment for clearing content in many parts of Arknights as a whole. They're not wrong, I actually agree with the general sentiment for what it's worth, and you can probably pass on investing in her in most cases. But if you do choose to unlock the talent at Elite 2 that lets her deposit her carried resources back to base, she can use Exoskeleton effectively to become a makeshift harvesting hub with her skill 1. Here's why I find this valuable. Even when you're very experienced with RA, these maps are huge. Panning the camera around to deploy your operators, activate skills, and set up constructs can be absolutely exhausting to the point where it's very likely you won't be able to keep up at times for one reason or another. Depending on how much you're able to handle, it's worth considering choosing more passive or automatically triggered skills for your squad compositions. Doing this can reduce the risk of a mistake being caused by forgetting to activate a skill, leaving a fast redeploying operator out idle, or other micromanagement slip-ups. So, in Kestrel's case specifically, while you could deploy a harvesting hub instead in most cases, sometimes you'll have a few tiles out of range that are too sparse to justify the cost of a hub, but too out of the way to babysit them with fast redeploy operators that you might need somewhere else right now. An E2 Kestrel can serve as a RA budget-friendly answer to that sour spot, covering resource collection in her exoskeleton area with skill 1. Of course, maybe this is just me holding on to old biases from playing pre-expansion when we didn't have all these options, but I still wanted to bring it up since it serves as a great excuse to talk about micromanagement overload and an overlooked use case that wouldn't otherwise get mentioned that is at its best because of post-expansion content. Alright, so you've got a big haul from Feral Strange territories and normal maps. What do you do with all of it? Besides spending it on upkeep for operators, tools, and cheap disposable high ground to gather even more, building up and defending passive resources of income is one of the highest priorities you'll have in the game. You'll start with 1 rice planter in your HQ, and as your HQ levels up, the maximum amount of rice planters you can craft and place inside your HQ will grow too. With how important rice planters are, the expansion updates decided to also give additional passive income options for other basic resources. HQ level 3 unlocks auto-sawing hubs, which you can also craft and place in your HQ for passive wood income, same as rice planters. This means theoretically on peaceful mode, you could skip days indefinitely and slowly amass as much wood as you need, all without deploying an operator or even spending any food. In practice though, you should still go out and gather more yourself, but every little bit helps. As you level up your HQ and push outwards on the main map, you'll unlock even more ways to passively farm things like stone, iron, rarer food ingredients, and even exotic beast materials for making some of the best tools, provisions, and constructs in the game. HQ level 3 also unlocks the Glowstick recipe, which is infamous for being a really cheesy way of abusing the save system. You see, your tech tree and shop reward points are preserved between all save loads, even if you fully reset your campaign. Since you get points for doing just about anything in the game, you can pool up a bunch of wood, wait for a save day, then slam them all into glowsticks afterwards. This racks up a bunch of points that you will collect on the next save day. Then, reload the save from right before you crafted the glowsticks, rinse, and repeat. The more wood you have to start, the better, and if you're strong enough to have higher HQ levels, you can gain a bigger bonus multiplier to go even faster if you can manage it. I personally didn't have to do this and just played normally, but don't let me stop you from doing this if that's what you want to do to make things that much easier. Besides, I already went over my personal thoughts on this method in a different video. Anyway, to cap this off, let me leave you with an updated set of general tips and best practices that I didn't get to cover as well in my previous guides. Firstly, this game mode doesn't demand perfection. Maybe a little forethought and planning, but there's a lot more leeway than you think. So don't be too bothered if you can't clean sweep a map in one act, for example. It's a perfectly valid strategy to focus on a damage squad for resource maps, followed by coming back with a collection squad to haul it all back on the second act. The amount of room there is for inefficiency is pretty wide, and I wouldn't even consider what I suggest fully optimized. It's just what I can share based on my experience and the feedback that I've gathered from others so far. When it comes to raids, even if you're not playing on peaceful, early raids are very easy to fend off before your first big challenge. Your HQ starts off with a whopping 50,000 HP and 400 defense. For comparison, that's about 10 times as much HP as my bulkiest max level defender, and about as much defense as my courier here, who is at E2 level 40 with a level 1 module. Don't sweat the layout at first either. I know the tutorial gives you this super tricked out base, then takes it away, which does suck, but if you can't afford to put up proper walls to set up a choke point, you still have plenty of time to kill most threats with cheap high ground tile support if your HQ needs to be your main tank. In the event that does happen, repairs do cost gold, but most raiding parties drop enough gold to cover the cost of repairs in the beginning. And remember, unlike integrated strategies, you get to reload your save and try again as many times as you want if needed. No need to throw away your whole campaign if you don't have to. This is all assuming, of course, that you end up defending at HQ though. There are plenty of opportunities to intercept an incoming raid before it walks up to your doorstep, and you're free to use the save system to figure out what works best for you. Some find it easier to spend their big food stockpile to whittle down a raiding party over multiple maps, while others might choose to put their outpost investment to good use and take down invaders in one decisive act. Both are valid. Second, I've got a few simple general guidelines for squad compositions in the early game. When food is scarce, especially when you're not playing on peaceful or standard mode, try to field 6-person squads to save on energy drinks. You'll be limited to 6 deployment limit anyway during the early game, so trying to clean sweep every map with a full squad of 12 operators can be overkill sometimes. You can save a lot of energy drinks by simply doing good enough with less when the stakes aren't very high to begin with before you take on more lucrative maps. For example, a good hunting squad might consist of operators like Ambriel, Ethan, Totter, Gravel, Scotty, and Jay. These operators offer a great combination of attack range map control and decent total damage output to cover areas with Overwatch and poke skittish prey into their clutches. If the prey is big enough to fight back, the heavier hitters will ensure that you're able to take down priority targets, just like you would in the regular game. If you've got better or worse operators than these available, adjust them to your needs. Maybe swap in May for the crowd-controlling slow and anti-air, or agents like Puzzle and Cantabile for extra DP generation and a fast redeploying package. I'll also share an example of a decent woodcutting or gathering squad these days. Take Silver Ash, Fire Whistle, Meteorite, Gray the Lightning Bearer, Yato, and Humus, plus harvesting hubs and Exoskeleton whenever possible. This squad offers a lot of multi-targeting or area-based physical damage with a slight bias towards 2 to 3 block melee operators to double as collectors, especially with Exoskeleton equipped. Again, upgrade or swap up and down as necessary. Just like before, you can swap in more DP generation if you feel sluggish. Splash or multi-target physical damage works great on trees with this setup, but as you advance through the game and gain access to our harvesting hubs to collect for you, you may want to switch to ranged and or arts damage once you start mining stone or iron due to the high defense and tile placements. There's 8 different pages for squads, so if you settle on a favorite combination for a particular task or map, save it on a spare page for quick access. I personally like to leave squads 1 and 2 as loose loadouts for general use, and then squads 3 through 8 are reserved for farming specific maps or types of maps. Once you do find yourself saving up resources steadily, use them! Don't be stingy, especially when it matters. A fully staffed 12 operator squad is perfectly worth it to take on important objective fights or lucrative maps that might need backup, DP generation, or both. Wood eventually becomes such an abundant resource that bringing disposable barriers and your own deployable high ground tiles is an easy bare minimum to treat yourself to. And even if you don't get access to a steady supply of path-altering walls until entering the mid-game, you can already start shaping the battlefields you call home in your favor from the get-go, since all constructs persist between battles. A little judicious spending goes a long way to making great returns on investment and getting those important HQ level upgrades and unlocks. Lastly, even if you do overspend and regret it, again, the save system is always there to help you undo the losses and experiment with different plans. Just like in integrated strategies, knowledge is power. Your next tries will always be better than the last in some way, and simply learning more through first-hand experience is the best way to get better at playing, no matter what. Speaking of experience, I've gone out of my way to gather more of my own for this video. You might have noticed that I've reset my save file to gather footage, since I need to do so in order to replay the early game with the new expansion content and operators we now have. Yes, that does mean losing all 400 plus days I've invested into clearing the campaign, fighting bosses in strange territories, and getting a particular armored slug all 7 track medals in the Circle of Gitmaludu. But there is a bright side to this. All the tech tree points I've accumulated are refunded, And if I wanted to rebuild faster, I can repurchase all of the tech tree nodes I have available to me at the start of the campaign, except for ones that are gated behind HQ level, of course. All of this is to say that even if you have to restart from day one for one reason or another, you can do so knowing that the new campaign will already have new advantages in your favor, on top of the fantastic post-expansion additions. With that, you should now have everything you need to get a good foothold and start discovering for yourself what other secrets and surprises are in store for you in this extensive game mode. That'll be it from me for now. Thanks for your attention, and if this helped, please leave a comment. I've got a few more guides in store for RA content that I haven't covered yet, and I still want to make a few bigger RA projects that some of you might have heard me tease on my Twitch live streams. And after that, who knows? Guides, goofs, and good thoughts can be about plenty of other things in Arknights and beyond, so if that sounds cool, hit subscribe to keep up with what I make when it comes out. And as always, good luck in the sands, and may your base stand the test of time.